we've got a group here, and we will, it's one of our first times with the Light Center doing our presentation. So I'm going to make sure we get it uploaded so some faculty can watch it after the fact. So thank you for coming. Let me go ahead and do presenter mode here. Okay, so we're going to cover managing student expectations. And like I mentioned, this is our first professional development session led by the Light Center. And I will be presenting it today. However, throughout our different scheduling opportunities, we will have different faculty and staff who will be leading these different sessions. So some upcoming sessions that we have are on academic integrity and plagiarism and information literacy. So we have a couple different ones. You can find more information on the Light Center calendar. We're getting it up and running as we speak. You can find everything on the Light Center. So we will be posting new posters and advertisements for upcoming sessions as we get that schedule solidified. Today, we will go over, well, what student expectations do our students have? What expectations do they come into our classrooms with? We'll look at faculty roles. We will look at teaching styles, consider how cultural expectations play a role into this situation. We'll look at a couple other classroom influencers and then think about what we can do. So I just ask that you put yourself on mute if you're not talking. With a small group, I think we'll be all right. Any questions as we get started? All right, so we will start with this overview. And really, we want to think about, sorry. Mute. All right. Thank you for coming a little late. We were just getting started.
Yay!
Hello.
Hello. All right, I am going to leave it on this mode just so I can mute easily if I need to and see who's coming in and not at the time. So really we want to talk about today as faculty, how do we respond to the additional needs, preconceived notions, and communication complexities that enter our classes. We are coming into our classes that have a very big and varied student population. We want to think about how the role of the teacher, based on their backgrounds, our students' backgrounds and their ideas, how that impacts our classes and our interactions with students. And we want to think about how maybe that's going to impact the studying habits or academic habits that students come into our classrooms with. So we're going to start with faculty roles. And I wanted to just start out with a few introduction questions. And later on in this presentation, I'm going to divide you into some breakout sessions. So you'll be able to talk with some of your colleagues here. But just to start, have you ever experienced any challenges in reaching a diverse group of students?
I'll say I have. I don't get the participation right off the bat that you would expect to have if you're asking interesting and fun questions and you want to get that involvement in your class and engagement, and then nobody volunteers and Sherm is saying he experiences that as well. And to rise to the challenge, and I try to call on people, but I'd rather not.
Right, so you come into the class, you've got all these great questions prepared. You have gone through that lesson and these questions, you're like, I know this works, I've taught this before. And then you get to this group of students and it's silent. And so you have to start thinking, well, what do I do with that? And in your case, you asked for volunteers or started calling on students. Can I get one more example of a challenge that maybe you have made?
Yeah, I've actually had a little bit of trouble most recently at a different school
reaching some low socioeconomic students. In that manner, that's what I think of. The first thing that comes to mind when I think of reaching the challenges of reaching a diverse group of students. So in their case, they're having trouble, for example, submitting assignments or accessing their online portion of their course because they lack internet or they lack resources. And so we have to get really creative in how they access the internet and start right off the bat talking about some of the other options such as the library or Starbucks or other coffee shops that they can go to, Panera Bread, where they can get free Wi-Fi and still have a moment to complete their assignments.
Definitely. So you're experiencing challenges with just getting students used to that habit and what they need to do to study and find that time away, and then coming up with ways to help them get through that and be on the path of success. Great, thank you. And that kind of leads in with maybe the second question that ties in with, how do you check in with your students? So how, especially when we're online, or at least we only see our students once a week, how do we check in and establish that rapport with our students, making sure that they know we're there, that when they're coming maybe from never having studied online before, or maybe not really being familiar with studying at the university level before? How do you check in with those students?
I just try to see what kinds of tools are at my disposal. So I know some teachers will use Remind 101 to be able to text their students. And that seems to work really well, at least at the K-12 level. I'm interested in using it. I have not used it myself. I just try to find what ways my students communicate best or want to receive messages the best if it's not an on-site course. And so, just using whatever I can, whether it be Google Calendar or, we always resort back to email, but to try not to over email my students, I'm trying to find creative ways. I still haven't figured it out, even after, several years of teaching, and technology is getting better and there's these great apps. So I'm always open to trying to figure out how to check in with my students, how to, get the message across that, hey, this is important on this week or this particular part of the course. So.
Great, thank you.
In my experience, I started this way differently, super differently. From the day one, I told to every student, I said, anything you're gonna hear from me, I'm not gonna send you personal email, look for announcement. Therefore, I show them what's the announcement. If I have something news for you, you're gonna go to announcement, you have to check. Gap is your best friend forever for 8 weeks through you and me. Between us, the gap is best friend. So you're gonna go to the announcement, you're gonna look. And then Thursday I am asking, before class started, I announced there about the textbooks, what textbook we're gonna use, who is the author, all the information. And also I told, if you have any student loans or financial aid, etc., if you did it or you are in the process of getting aid, please make sure add your textbooks, it's gonna be covered and you can get paid for it and you buy it. However, in the class, when I saw some of them have, some of them doesn't, and some people had the PDF format, I said, I don't care, I don't mind. Any format of the book, you have to have the book in terms of studying this class.
Right, and so yeah, you established what's gonna happen at the beginning of the class and you stay consistent with that. And consistent is one of those things that we're going to look at a little bit later with being consistent and fair with our students. And then let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, are you familiar with the different education systems? I know that's a very broad question, but are you familiar with some of the education systems of your students that you have? I see some hands.
Multinational, multilingual, multicultural, and also multi-university system graduate student. So I have Soviet Union graduation, I have Uzbekistan graduation, I have American degree as well. So I am super familiar with all different national studies.
Excellent. Yeah. So that's kind of the model, but you're probably one of I don't know. Well, we do have a pretty good an interesting faculty group. So I would say that we do probably have a lot of faculty that are very familiar with different education systems in other countries, whether or not they've studied somewhere else or been very interested in different cultures or just familiarized themselves with their countries of their student population so they could help support their students. So let's go ahead and move into the role of the instructor. And what we want to think about, what do you consider the role of the instructor? And in this category, we'll use professor. What do you consider that role to be, and why do you have that idea? What is a good professor? What do they do?
They're engaging.
Engaging.
Listening and delivering the information to the students. Able to be listen, understand the question, and deliver the right time, right answer.
Great.
I would say fostering critical thinking.
Someone who fosters critical thinking. Yeah, definitely.
And facilitate learning through examples and experience.
I like the word facilitator there. That's a good one. Let's get one more.
Supporting learning.
Supporting learning. So someone who's supportive, and that kind of ties in with another response there, with listening and then being able to have the right answer too. So supporting students in the ways they need. How might this role, and we are coming with a couple different ideas here, how might this differ among different student populations or different classes? Do you think that they might consider the role of a professor differently than what we've just listed?
They're all differently saying, and they're trying actually sometimes abuse that system, saying different professor requires differently, you require differently. In that case, I am telling to them, this is not my requirement. This is university requirement. This is all for all the professors, the same requirements, and they deliver to you the same requirements. However, if you did not understand or didn't know how to do it, it's okay. We are here to teach you, to show you, so you get better information about any required question.
Right, and I like how you say, we're here to show you, to tell you, so kind of like modeling. You have an idea of a characteristic of modeling. Yeah.
I agree with Professor. I think that there's a different type of expectations depending on the student population. And also, I think that students expect professors to behave differently depending on that student population. So while one group may expect a professor to just walk into the classroom, dump the knowledge on the students and walk out, and students are just supposed to absorb it, other, student populations will expect the professor to be more of, we go back to that facilitator word, where the instructor is guiding them towards the right answer, but the student is actually doing the work. I think also different student populations are afraid to challenge the professor, so dissent of ideas is something that is not accepted in that particular student population. And while other student populations are very comfortable with challenging ideas, and I think a lot of it has to do with the professor saying, don't just accept everything that I say, go out and research it and decide for yourself. So I think that, depending on the student population, that those are some of the approaches also that might be different. It's something that really interests me. I'm glad you asked the question, about those different education systems. I think a lot of that comes into play with those populations as well.
Yeah, I think just to add on to what you were saying, my experience lies in for-profit ESL schools, a large scale, so 15,000 students a year. And I would have one student come into my office and tell me, oh, this professor doesn't ever just teach us. He's always putting us in groups. And then the next student would come in, I love that professor because we don't just sit and listen. And so at first I used to get really stressed out because I'd hear this, and I was like, what do I even do? And then it just became this idea of how do we adapt how do we think about how our students perceive us And how does that play into how they respond to our classroom styles, our classroom teaching? And a lot of times it's about explaining what it's going to look like, kind of giving a heads up that this style, this is how I am, this is how I'm going to be teaching. It might be a little different from other professors or teachers that you've had, but I'm excited to work with you this session. So I want to go into that role of teachers a little bit more. And what we're going to do is I am right now sending out in the chat the PDF of this, this presentation. And what you're going to do is you can open it and go on to slide 9. I'm also going to put you in breakout sessions. And I want you to think about, as Brown mentions here, that a teacher has many roles to fill. And these roles include anything from authority figure to confidant to friend or counselor, leader. And so we see a bunch of ranges, or a big range of roles that teachers are maybe expected or thought to have. And I want, in your groups, I want you to think about how these roles, or how have you seen some of these roles come out in your own teaching? Which ones come a little more naturally to you, and which ones are you kind of curious about maybe how you could integrate that into your classroom? So I'm going to divide you up into a couple different rooms. Have you done breakout sessions before? Okay, so doubly. Some of you are on phones, so we'll see if that works, but I'm going to jump back and forth. If you do want my attention, you can go and add call, I don't know if it says call teacher or call something, and I'll come over to your room, but I'm gonna go ahead and separate you. Is everyone good to go with what we're doing?
Professor Hirashiki, I'm involved in completing some work, which I'm doing at the same time as I'm hearing your lecture, so I may not be able to participate, but I can listen in.
Okay, perfect. I'm gonna just move you over to a room so you can listen to them talk. All right.
This is Dr. Goodstone, and we're a team, so put us there together. We're in the
same room.
We're in the same.
It might be a little hard to separate you. All right, so I'm creating 2 different rooms, and I'm starting that now. You're going to hit accept or join. All right, the other room is waiting until until they get kicked out.
Always a good sign.
Yep. All right, here they should be coming back. All right, welcome back.
Okay.
All right, I heard a lot of really good ideas as you were discussing, and I think it's helpful to talk with one another because we all have different styles of teaching, but we also have different personalities, and personality was what came up a lot and what I was listening in on. And I just wanted to take one that Professor Appisardi was bringing in as I snuck in on the tail end of that friend category of it being a very challenging line of where's friend. You know, I also understand that one because it's like friendly or friend. Both of them have different implications with students, and it's something. But sometimes they need someone to talk to, which could be more like a confidant. But maybe a student isn't getting along with their classmates, and they just need someone to kind of sit there and joke with them for a minute. So it's not saying you need to go out and take them to the movies and be their best friend, but it might be kind of, in a sense, letting down your guard to cheer someone up a little bit.
And Jen, just to add to that point too, I think it's also a support system, right? So as I was explaining in our breakout group, I've had a student who had some personal challenges and just being empathetic, right? And just, you know, working with them. So you're not really blurring the line between teacher and student or friend and professional, but you're actually just being more understanding and working with them to, you know, be flexible. And I think that kind of crosses over that line sometimes, and to, you know, from confidant to friend, if you will.
Right, definitely, good point. And so I want to continue this. Do you think that any of these roles might impact fairness within the classroom? And if so, how does that work? Or what would you say that would be?
I think Professor Raposardi, if I said that right, said it best. He said, you know, if you become too close and maybe make a friendship, that maybe favoritism could come into play, and then that wouldn't be fair to the majority of the class. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Also, for example, if you're number one, an authority figure, so from a student's perspective, the student could say, well, how come this professor was not that harsh with their words or their constructive feedback, I would say, right, with this student, but with me, he was a lot more direct and a lot more harsh and to the point, and maybe he's playing favorites and doesn't like me too well. So maybe that could be a problem there.
Right, that's a good point too.
From the student perspective, yeah.
I was going to say, just to piggyback on that, Dr. Sayaj, if you look at the role of guide, to your point, you might have higher expectations for some of your stronger performing students, so you might push them harder than your underachieving students, if you will, because you expect that you have a high level of expectation. So in a way, there could be some sort of favoritism on the opposite side of that spectrum.
Would that be bad though? I think of like differentiation in the classroom. I mean, rather than teaching to the middle, would that be expecting, I don't know, like, would that be, you want your lower performing students to achieve the course learning outcomes, but at the same time, you want to push those who are just blasting through the material. What do you think?
That's a really good question. And I think it's not necessarily about the content, like the subject content, but it might just be in how you come off. As in maybe consistent, or maybe that would be more of like an inconsistent feeling where it's like, come on, I know you can do this, and you come over here and it's like, oh, you're really trying very hard. I can see how you're going to get better at this, versus maybe kind of being more pushy with certain students. So I can see what you're talking about with the differentiation with learning. But I think this might be tied a little bit more to like the personality that we give off as a teacher or a professor. Does that make sense?
To take Dr. Flores' point also, I wonder if you could look at the opposite end of that coin, upside that coin, where you could say, well, the people who aren't getting that extra attention because they're not performing that well, right? Maybe they might feel like neglected because they're not, to Dr. Flores' point, blasting through the objectives as much. So they might not have that undivided attention and focus of the faculty, right? Isn't that a possibility?
Yeah.
Yeah, really good points.
Also, I think it's really interesting that Brown says that a teacher has many roles to fill. And in our breakout session, we talked about filling the roles interchangeably during the same time period, let's say, and not having difficulty with that, as maybe compared to picking one or two of these roles and then living that one at a time with kind of an emphasis. So it's interesting, like when you fulfill these roles, that is a part of what this teaching experience is about.
Right, that you know when to employ different times. And then that's not just on a day-to-day, that's on a class-to-class, on a small scale and large scale. So I just want to move to this next slide because it continues with that idea of fairness. And we've talked about some of that unfairness, some examples. And it comes down to also that inconsistency that's within that personality. So if you look up here and you're like the example where we gave, like, right, 1 minute you're super friendly and then the next minute you turn into authoritarian. It might be kind of hard to navigate, or how students might perceive that. And it might make some students uncomfortable with never knowing how the professor might be, what role they might have. There might be a potential for a role shift depending on student attitude, participation, or learning styles. But we want to think about fairness. And this isn't, I'm not saying that just because you can go back and forth, or maybe you tend to be more on one direction, stronger in one area, that you are not being fair. I think it's an internal question that we just want to think about as we are teaching, and how our teaching might look differently. Oh, did I turn on this thing, or did someone else turn on that? So that is something that we can look into. I want to move into teaching styles because it ties into our personality type or our role of students there. And I'm going to, again, put you into some breakout sessions, but it's going
Cool.
to,
So,
we're going to,
other thing, new IPS emails when stuff comes in. Shoot out the
Yes.
email. Okay.
Okay.
Weekly report. We already went over the Alina.
Yes.
Everybody only. Nathan meeting. Payroll. All pendings.
all right, there we go. Got the mute under control over here. But what we can do now is I want you to look at this chart and I want you to describe your teaching style. Would you say that your style is consistent with your personality? What ways might it be different? So take a minute and maybe pick one that really pinpoints you. Which one or where might you be on maybe a really solid right or left side, or maybe one that you're in the middle on. So let's get a few answers and then we're going to discuss this with a couple more questions in the breakout sessions again.
Are you looking for answers now, Jen, or do you want us to wait?
Yeah, so if you just want to shout out at something that, 2 or 3 right now, and then you're going to answer some deeper questions.
Okay. Well, I'll go for understated. I don't know how often I'm that, but understated to dramatic. I definitely can be that. And I like bringing that into the classroom because I'm in marketing. Marketing's in my blood. I'm a public speaker as well as public relations. So I'm going to be dramatic, but I can also.
You're on this side of the spectrum, right?
Right.
Great. Let's get a couple more.
See, I'm actually in marketing also, and I'm more on the gregarious side of that conversation, that spectrum where, I might kind of start off on the shy end because I'm trying to get a feel for the class and the personalities, but as you start getting into the material and getting really excited about it and passionate, you just blow the speakers off and go into that gregarious mode.
Interesting.
I would say I am open, transparent.
Open and transparent. Because, yeah, you're the one that started out with, I tell students exactly where all my information is coming from. All right, let's get one.
I would say probably I would be dramatic, emotional, and then probably steady. So 2 on the right side and 1 on the left side. That would be me.
Interesting. Okay. Well, let's go ahead, and you're going to, again, in your PowerPoint that you download, that PDF, I'm going to put you again into some groups, and I want you to think about these questions. Is there one side that makes a better professor? Which ones are you drawn to in your own education experiences? Which ones do Western culture deem as important? And how might some of these be misconstrued by our students? Maybe thinking that it's less, it's maybe quality isn't up to what they thought that a teacher or a professor should have. So again, it's going to be slide 13, and I'm going to divide you into a couple groups, and I'm going to give you about 6 minutes. So we're going to be fast on this one.
Session.
I didn't get your question, Dr. Goodstone. It was cut off bad connection.
You wanted to blend in there with us.
Yes, as I said, I'm in a lift being driven to come to my class, but I'm really enjoying the comments, and I like Dr. Sayuj confirming that the fact that I felt I'm bipolar. I'm a little bit sometimes on the left, as you have noticed, serious, and I'm sure you've seen me humorous in class as well. So I like that being bipolar, and the fact that you're allowed to be on both sides and encouraged. I want to say that that was very insightful for me, and I enjoyed that very much.
Victor, I've only known you as humorous when I've seen your classes.
All right. Well, I hope you've got some good discussion. I'm going to kind of jump through so we can stay ahead on schedule. I know some of you do have classes to get to. But we've talked about the roles of the teacher style or teaching styles. And when I say teacher, I'm using it interchangeably with professor in this context. But we've also kind of tied it in with some cultural expectations that students have. So it opens and kind of thickens the plot here. And I'm going to leave you with this list here, and you have the PDF so you can follow through, but it's some differences that you might see between these two columns. And this is what Dr. Sayaj, I think, was talking about, where you have like all in this area and then all in this area, and you never know. Oh, this might have been in a breakout session where you poll 20 students and ask them what features they liked, and then try it again, and it doesn't have the same answer. So typically you're going to see some of these different answers here, or teachers are expected to have all the answers versus teachers are allowed to say, I don't know. Showing emotions, suppressing emotions. And some of these we do see in the right hand side where it's, uh-oh, someone's got the annotation on again. So maybe if one of you can figure out how to get that off, helpful. But a lot of time in Western culture, we emphasize the non-directive, non-authoritarian roles, and it comes out in our styles too, where we can admit to saying we're wrong and still maintain some student respect. But that might not be the case depending on our student group. And we want to make sure that we have a balance of that and we know what we're doing with that. Moving on to other factors that influence the classroom. Aside from those roles and teaching styles, we have other factors that influence a diverse classroom. So like how you work together, how students, do they like working with one another? Do they like group work? Would they rather just work on their own pace with their own worksheet? The concept of punctuality. We start at 5 o'clock. Obviously today we had a different punctuality idea when we started 10 minutes later. Pacing, moving too fast, interruptions, how we grade different assignment types. All of these actually factor into what influences a classroom. And so it's not just the roles, the styles, students' preconceived notions, but it's also all of these factors as well. So what can we do? In summary, be available. We can try not to assume what our students are thinking. We can try to avoid preconceptions, stereotypes, maybe understand the concept of face. We can address differences in communication. We can incorporate critical pedagogy and be observant and be vigilant and diligent in helping our students. So does anyone have any questions or comments?
Well, I think it's great because it reinforces that you can do many things in the classroom as a teacher. You don't have to try to adhere to one style or one type of communicating. This is very important message.
Definitely. So I encourage you all to think about how your styles are and how you reach your different students, and from class to class, from session to session. And I thank you for coming today. And if you would like to present a Light professional development session, please contact Light at westcliff.edu. And we can put that on the calendar, and we'd love to have that. And then I leave you with a couple references on the last page. So if you have a class, feel free to log off. If you have any questions, I'll stay around for another minute or two.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. This was really informative.
Thank you for attending. What time is it?
It's
6:02.
10 in the morning.
10 in the morning for you. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, we're all in different slots.
Oh.
And have a good class, Dr. Woodley. I know you're going to log off.
I was gonna ask if we can talk for a little bit.
Sure. I'll send you another Zoom link if that's okay.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, all right.